Cicero was one of those men you pass by on the street and barely notice, but he was more human than many a man in a tie. Every day, with a tight aluminum lunchbox in his hands, he arrived at the construction site before sunrise, sweaty and ready. It was there, among the cement and bricks, that he first saw Miguel, a disabled child, quiet, sitting in a wheelchair. Without questions, without judgments, he simply shared what he had. And let's face it, sometimes a little is worth more than any fortune. Cicero's gesture, silent as a whisper of compassion, revealed the greatness hidden in the simplest of actions. He didn't know who that boy was, nor if he would return the next day, but he took an extra piece of food just in case, a little rice, some mashed chicken, and a kindness that didn't fit in the lunchbox. This is solidarity in its purest form, not the kind that takes pictures and posts them, but the kind that happens anonymously and transforms. And what a beautiful transformation was about to happen. The work continued with the sound of nails and the smell of concrete, but for Cicero there was something stronger, the presence of Miguel, who observed everything in silence. No one there saw the boy as he did. No one noticed that, with that fixed gaze and serene expression, he was simply asking for presence. The bricklayer understood this instinctively, as if he were recognizing the cry of a soul, and that was when something began that could not be measured in cement or time. It was the beginning of a mission. What began as a simple piece of bread soon became something much bigger. Cicero didn't need to hear words to understand Miguel. The exchange of glances, the small smiles, and the comfortable silence formed a language of their own, intimate and powerful. It was as if the bricklayer and the disabled child shared something sacred, pure empathy. And there, between one brick and another, an invisible bond was born, stronger than any concrete. This relationship grew based on presence, without obligations, without contracts, just with the firmness of someone who cares about him. Cicero spent the morning wondering if Miguel would show up again, and he lovingly set aside an extra portion of food and even a clean shirt. This is what we call genuine care, the kind that comes without interest, that worries without needing a thank you. And Miguel responded with what he had, shining eyes and a handshake that said it all. It is beautiful to see how a friendship can blossom without words, only with gestures. The wheelchair, often ignored by others, was a meeting point for Cicero. He would prepare a shaded space, adjust the support board, and wait for his friend. That work, which before was only dust and noise, now had a nobler purpose. And it was in this simple routine that a connection was solidified that no diploma teaches, but that every pure heart understands. While Cicero cultivated humanity, his workmates preferred to feed prejudice. "Are you a nanny now?" they would say between laughs and cross-comments, always with that tone of someone who doesn't understand, or doesn't want to understand, the value of a silent gesture. But he didn't retaliate. He adjusted his cap, picked up his lunchbox, and headed to the fence where Miguel was waiting for him. For him, the mission was clear: to do good without looking at who and without caring who was watching. The courage to be kind in a tough environment like a construction site is not for everyone. It is easy to make fun of those who are different, but it is difficult to lend a helping hand. Cicero did this every day, without needing applause. He saw Miguel as a human being, not a burden, and with each shared lunch, each improvised shade, each bottle of water passed over the fence, he proved that leadership is not about shouting orders, it is about inspiring by example. The most curious thing is that over time, even the mockers began to remain silent. Something in that relationship bothered the ego of those who had never had the courage to give of themselves. Maybe it was Miguel's gaze, maybe it was Cicero's firm respect, or maybe it was the discomfort of seeing that a bricklayer with calluses on his hands taught about empathy better than many doctors, and what seemed like just a passing concern was just the beginning of a social transformation. On a normal morning, amidst the noisy routine of work, a luxury car stopped smoothly in front of the gate. It was the kind of vehicle that never passed by there, and that's why it caught everyone's attention. A well-dressed man got out, with distressed eyes and the hurry of someone carrying a pain in his chest. He called out for Miguel, and in an instant, silence took over the building. The boy turned his head and, with a restrained smile, answered the call that many there did not expect to see. Cicero, who was still holding his lunchbox, looked at Miguel and then at the man, not really understanding what was happening. But when the boy tried to push the wheelchair with his trembling hands and his father ran to hug him, everything became clear. That boy was the son of a millionaire. Daniel, his father, cried with relief and gratitude at seeing him again. And in the midst of that emotion, his eyes fell on Cicero, the bricklayer who was feeding his son without knowing who he was. The look between Daniel and Cicero was a meeting of worlds. One represented material wealth, the other spiritual wealth. "You fed my son, gave him shade, gave him clothes, gave him presents," were the father's words. And at that moment, the mocking laughter of his colleagues evaporated into thin air. Prejudice gave way to respect. That silent gesture had become a cry of humanity, showing that a simple act can break down any social barrier. The next day, the same luxury car returned, but this time without rushing or despairing. Daniel, the millionaire father, was wearing simpler clothes, but his gaze carried something even more valuable: gratitude. He walked up to Cicero, who was mixing mortar, and asked to talk. He took an envelope with money out of his pocket as a way of thanking him. But the bricklayer calmly and firmly refused. "There are things that no amount of money can buy," he said. Daniel was silent, visibly touched. It wasn't just a thank you that he wanted to say. It was a real, profound recognition from someone who understood that what Cicero did could not be bought. Miguel didn't smile with therapists, caregivers, or security guards, but he did smile with the bricklayer. The father understood then that what his son needed was empathy and presence, not luxury or protocols. It was then that a new idea began to emerge, to transform this gesture into something bigger. Inspired by the bond between Miguel and Cicero, Daniel decided to create the Miguel Support Center, a rehabilitation center for children with disabilities, focusing not only on the structure, but on humanity, and he didn't want to do it alone. He invited Cicero to lead the project, not only as a bricklayer, but as a reference. The recognition was no longer formal. It was an invitation to a mission, and Cicero, even though surprised, accepted humbly, carrying on his shoulders not only the cement, but now a purpose. 2 months later, the scene was different. In a forgotten neighborhood, the columns of the Miguel Support Center began to rise firmly. And there was Cicero, no longer just as a bricklayer, but as the leader of the work. He arrived before the sun, distributed tasks, guided the new ones, and inspired even the old colleagues who had previously laughed at him. His faded cap remained the same, but now he wore something even more valuable: respect. The center wasn't just made of bricks and cement, it was made of empathy and purpose. With each wall built, Cicero taught more than just technique, he taught values. Anyone who arrived new to the project soon learned from him the importance of care, of welcoming silence, of genuine attention. Miguel would show up every now and then, pushed by a caretaker, and he always received the same affection as he had at the beginning. "The chief engineer has arrived," Cicero joked, kneeling beside him. Social transformation was already underway. The bricklayer, who had once been the butt of ridicule, was now an example of leadership and inspiration. Even investors were impressed by the atmosphere at the construction site. It wasn't just a construction site. It was a living testament to how humanity, when valued, is capable of generating eternal fruits. And it all started with a shared lunchbox. It was a small gesture that blossomed into a mission. On the grand opening day, the facade of the Miguel Support Center was decorated with ribbons and emotional looks. Miguel, in the first row, wore a white shirt with the center's name embroidered on it. Cicero, as always, remained in the background, discreet, observing everything with humility. When his name was called to cut the ribbon, he hesitated, surprised. But it was Miguel, with a simple, insistent gesture, who pulled him to the center of the scene. The golden scissors trembled in his calloused hands. Around him, dozens of people, businessmen, teachers, parents, and children, applauded this simple man who did not want recognition, but had achieved something greater, genuine admiration. When cutting the ribbon, Cicero did not speak loudly, but whispered to Miguel, "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be a person." That phrase, whispered in his ear, echoed louder than any official speech. It was his heart speaking the truth. The scene moved everyone. That final gesture closed a cycle and opened another, even grander one. This was not just the inauguration of a building, it was the victory of empathy over prejudice, of care over neglect, of love over judgment. Cicero showed that a bricklayer can, indeed, build more than walls. He can build invisible bridges between souls, and that, my friend, is the kind of leadership the world needs to see more of. And now, after learning about the story of Cicero and Miguel, I ask you, how many opportunities have you missed to lend a helping hand to someone? In the midst of the hustle and bustle of your day, have you seen the people around you with true humanity? Sometimes, all it takes is a silent gesture, a friendly word, or even a simple piece of bread to transform someone's life, and without realizing it, yours too. What kind of work have you been building in your day-to-day life? Are you building walls or bridges? The world is full of people in need of a welcoming gaze and a presence that does not judge. And who knows, that simple attitude that no one sees is precisely the key to something greater than you ever imagined. Miguel did not speak, but taught. Cicero did not ask for applause, but showed what it means to be an example. And you, what have you shown the world? If this story touched you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, each video is an invitation to reflect and a little push for us to live with more purpose. Until the next meeting, where a new story can teach you even more about what it means to be truly human.